Good evening, everyone. If you would like to make a public comment or speak during an item, please give your comment card to Amelia at the end of the table.
Are we ready? I'll call the meeting to order and roll call. Amanda.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Here.
Commissioner Brager?
Here.
Commissioner Clayt?
Here.
Commissioner Huebner?
Yes, that's me.
Commissioner McCord? Commissioner McCord?
Here.
Vice Chair McCombs?
Here.
Chair Mulligan?
Here. Next up is the minutes. Do we have anyone who has submitted public comments or indicated they want to speak on this item?
We do not.
Okay. And do we have any comments from commissioners? Right. I have one comment, and that is on the minutes. It was Commissioner McCombs who made the motion to accept the minutes, not me. So I guess we'll hear a motion.
Move to approve with that change.
I second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Commissioner Brager?
Yes.
Commissioner Clayt?
Yes.
Commissioner Huebner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCord?
Abstain.
Vice Chair McCombs?
Yes.
Chair Mulligan?
Yes. Next up, we have the state drought-related emergency regulation for water conservation, and that will be Jenny.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to give you an update on the state drought-related emergency regulation for water conservation. Okay, so this afternoon at 3:30, the State Water Resources Control Board adopted the proposed emergency regulation text that was in your packet with some minor revisions for water providers that can demonstrate they have a reliable water supply, do not rely on Colorado River State Water Project, Central Valley Water, less than 10% from critically overdrafted basins, and have a per capita total water use less than 55 gallons. So that is not us. And so we are required to implement the demand management actions in our Stage 2 water shortage event contingency plan. So these are just the highlights from the text. Again, the main item is that we need to implement the water demand measures in our Stage 2 by June 10th. We obviously can't do that exactly. We're going to be as close as we can. We're going to take it to City Council on June 13th. It's on the agenda. We also are required now to submit a preliminary annual supply and demand assessment by June 1st, which we will do our best to meet. I can't promise it will be to the standards of the state because they're requiring fiscal year data, and that's not how we did ours. We were going to redo it, but we can't do it in 6 days. So we'll do the fiscal. We'll probably just give them calendar year data or send the CWRR, and then we'll do the fiscal year requirement by July 1st. And then the third thing that the regulation required was it prohibits the irrigation of non-functional turf with potable water for commercial, industrial, and institutional uses. So just reiterate that according to our supply-demand analysis, we would not meet those criteria for a shortage stage, but we are doing this to comply with these regulations. These are our shortage stages, so the regulation states to do your 10 to 20% reductions, or, and it has stage 2 in parentheses, so we're interpreting that as we would implement stage 2. So I have a couple slides that highlight all of the actions associated with stage 2 from the city and from customers. Not all the actions on the city actions will be taken, but a lot of them will be. So we're monitoring conservation levels, notifying customers of the shortage, and giving out water conservation kits. We've continued our conservation programs throughout, so those are ongoing. Publicize the shortage stage, the shortage of it contingency plan stages and the actions. Provide information on the bills. Implement the water shortage surcharge rates. We'll discuss that a little bit in a minute. We're not intending to do that. Prepare a resolution for city council, probably be a modified resolution. Enforce mandatory water consumption reduction program for all customers and users. We have our water waste provisions are permanent, so those are always in place. Promote efficient use. Implement water conservation programs. Enforce the water waste ordinance. Inform new development applicants of the water shortage and contingency plan. The regulation was clear to point out this is not a building moratorium or a connection moratorium. It's conservation enhancement. And then provide ways to increase use of recycled water to reduce potable water usage. We continue to have our mobile reuse program. We have other ways to encourage recycled water usage. Customer actions are shorter, so monitor water usage, repair leaks, implement conservation measures, comply with the water waste ordinance, encourage use of non-potable water, and then there's some extra regulations for hotels and motels. So like I said, we're really focusing on the demand management measures, and those are highlighted here. Stage 2 is expand our public information campaign and implement the shortage surcharge rates. We're not recommending to implement the surcharge rates at this time. We feel like with the programmed rate increases, it's not necessary. It's in the shortage plan as primarily a revenue recovery, but with the recognition that it does encourage some conservation. But we feel like at this time, since we're not our supplies exceed our demands, it's not appropriate right now to implement surcharge rates. And then this is just a list of our water waste prohibitions. So don't allow water to run and be wasted. Don't allow leaks for more than 48 hours. You have to have automatic shut-off nozzle. Fountains have to be off or recirculating. No hosing down of hard surfaces. Do not irrigate within 48 hours of rainfall. And then just kind of your generic water waste provision. And then it does include also the restaurants not serving customers without requesting water. So that's it. So our recommendation is to take the necessary actions to comply with the state drought-related emergency regulation that was adopted this afternoon. And like I said, that's essentially just increasing our conservation outreach campaigns and messaging to customers to increase conservation and continuing that. And that will include sending out notices and bills, increased social media, and just a lot more mailers and information to customers. That's our main thing. All right.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, have we had anybody indicate they wish to submit public comments or speak on this item?
We do not.
Okay. Let's go through the commissioners and just see if anyone has any questions or comments. We'll start with Commissioner McCombs.
Question would be,
given that they only told you at 3:30, when do you have the next training session scheduled for customers who might be interested in trying to take advantage of the recycled water who have not previously done so?
We hold meetings or trainings as necessary. Today, for example, we had 2 people interested in it, so we provided them a training for it. So if we get, we try to do it, accommodate once a week pretty much, but if there's a big group, we can accommodate that as well.
So
everything will be online.
So I would say that's a key piece of the public information is because, like, oh, I never did it before. I don't know what it's involved. You have Mr. Poster Child right here who can talk about how wonderful it is. But I mean, I think it's becoming something that people are more aware of. And the only thing we have going for us is the fact that if Newsom enacted it, nobody in Ventura pays attention to the fact that we don't rely on state water or all of that, but there will be a lot of news coverage. So we might as well piggyback on all of that to the extent we can. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner McCord.
No questions.
Commissioner Ackerman.
No questions.
Commissioner Breger.
No questions.
Commissioner Clyte.
Just a question on public education, on water conservation. I'm probably one of the few, maybe the only commissioner who is a renter, and I live in a multifamily housing situation and have for many years. And I have never once, ever, gotten any kind of anything from anybody on water conservation. Now, I do conserve water, but and especially in light of the growing number of multifamily buildings that we have in our city, I think it would be very good to target the people living in those kinds of situations. Do we have anything in the works on that?
Not to my knowledge. It's something that we've discussed repeatedly, and I thought Stephen, was Stephen working on a pilot? Stephen's not available today. But yes, comment very much noted, and we will work on that. I know there were some limitations in the past, and we're working through those challenges. But yes, we recognize we need to increase outreach to multifamily residents.
Right, and then is there outreach to the owners, managers of large buildings?
Yes,
Yeah.
they have done that, and it was, I think, primarily focused on outdoor watering, but there is a group, and there has been, at least pre-COVID, there was outreach and meetings and that, and I'm not sure where that's at now, but that will be, since one of these provisions is to prohibit watering at commercial, institutional areas, and there's some applicability to HOAs that I think there'll be more outreach on that to those larger building owners.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hubner.
Yeah, just one, in today's meeting, I'm assuming you watched it, or was there any pushback, or was there anything proposed that they didn't adopt? Sort of the question being, is there something else down the line that they didn't adopt today that we might anticipate?
No, I mean, their main thing that they did today was they heard a lot of comments about providers who are not in a shortage and do not rely on state water, and have invested in local supplies or practices to reduce, and they can't really do much more, or they have some localities have much more stringent stage 2 provisions than the state was suggesting, and so they were concerned that they were going to have to implement those when they weren't really necessary, and then it also, then it's like crying wolf a little bit too. So they were concerned about that. So this is why this provision was added here, primarily to address Santa Cruz. But they were very persistent that the 55 gallons per capita per day total use was the ceiling for that. So there was some pushback on that, but they were like, no, we want we don't want this to be, we want this to be a very small number of people that are, it's not really exempt, they just get to use a less, if they have a very stringent water shortage contingency plan provisions, they can use the state's provisions, which were less, if they're less stringent. The only other thing is just that, the 15% voluntary reduction that Newsom called for last year is still in effect, and there's been repeated warnings that if these conservation measures these voluntary measures do not work, that 15% will become mandatory. So that's kind of the only outstanding threat.
Thank you.
How far off is the city from 55 gallons per capita per day? Monica, I'm going to let you go. Low 70s? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Newsom's, we aren't conserving 15%. What's the baseline for the 15%?
So the baseline is 2020.
Yeah, that's
And
already a
so-
low baseline.
And right now, I mean, we would really, city would really like if we could just stay at 2020. I mean, that's what we program in our CWRR. That's kind of what we adjust our demand projections annually through the CWRR, but we sort of project that we're going to stay in that 5-year average. So we would really like to see our customers stay in that 2020 range. 15% below that, I don't know that's feasible. I think that's why it hasn't been met. And with the hydrologic conditions as they have been since after 2020, last year and this year, water usage has gone up 20%. So I think asking people to go backwards 15% is not really reasonable or feasible. I think holding the line is a good goal. But yeah, we're definitely, things are increasing, and it's not raining, and so people have outdoor plants and things that they want to keep watered and alive, and so that's what they're doing. So I think encouraging the mobile reuse and really hitting the outdoor conservation hard for us.
Thank you. Any more commissioner comments or questions? All right, then I think we're looking for a motion. I don't know if you want to put that back up.
Public comment?
Oh, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No,
on the
we
item?
don't.
Now, a motion.
Move that the Water Commission enact the recommendation as presented on the slide.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Breger,
Yes.
Commissioner Clyte,
Yes?
Commissioner Huebner,
Yes.
Commissioner McCord,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCombs,
Yes.
and Chair Mulligan.
Yes. Thank you. Next item is the proposed fiscal year 2022-23 Ventura water budget, and I think Susan will start this item off.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Water Commission. I wanted to make a few comments. At last month's meeting, a staff report and presentation regarding the rates check-in was on the agenda, and after the presentation, the Water Commission provided feedback and asked staff to bring this item back to this month's meeting. The following 3 agenda items really work together to address the Water Commission's questions. First of all, Michael Kuhn is going to provide a brief update on the proposed Ventura water operating and capital improvement budget for fiscal year 22-23. The proposed budget was presented to Council on May 3rd, which included upcoming scheduled rate adjustments. A budget workshop will then be conducted with City Council on May 31st, followed by Council adoption likely on June 13th. And then following Michael will be Phil Nelson and Peter Shade with Public Works Department. They're going to present the capital improvement project delivery update. The project cost and schedules have been updated from the 2020 rate study estimates and were provided to Reftelis to incorporate into the updated model. This presentation does not include the projects associated with MBR and Ventura Water Pier. A discussion on those projects are included in the Reftelis presentation. And then finally, the third agenda item, Kevin Kostick of Reftelis, along with his staff, will provide an analysis and update of the annual rate check-in. As mentioned, Raftellus presented the rate check-in at the April meeting where key changes were incorporated into the model, and they're discussed in the staff report. In response to Water Commission questions at the April 26th meeting, they have worked with city staff to further refine those projections in the financial plan. The financial plan, kind of an update, is really a 10-year plan that determines the amount of revenue needed for the water and wastewater enterprises for each year. As Kevin will demonstrate, the enterprises are only able to balance by virtue of creative yet defensible legal debt coverage tools, savings from several unfilled positions, delayed capital projects, and including the rescheduled rate adjustments. Staff has attempted to answer the Water Commission's questions in the staff report and its attachments. So in conclusion of these reports and presentations, staff is recommending implementing the year 2 of rate increases tonight. So Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. All right, so as Susan mentioned, the proposed budget was presented to City Council on Tuesday, May 3rd. I'm going to be covering with you the pieces that are relevant to Ventura Water. So to start off, like I said, we're going over some position changes, and then looking at the numbers for the operating funds real quick. So just, as an information, every year during the budget process, we report back on basically the changes from the last adopted budget to this current budget cycle. So while not a new item for next year, an item that happened this year was one position was added mid-year for senior accounting assistant in the billing group. Like I said, so that's something that like I said, was done outside of a budget process, so just highlighting it here, so that everyone's aware of how the numbers add up year to year. And then what is included in the budget for next year are 2 new positions, one in the water fund, one in the wastewater fund. There'd be operator position for water, and then a collection utility worker on the wastewater side. Oops, sorry. And then here we have the wastewater fund. I think we're all very familiar with this chart. We have actuals going back to fiscal year 2017, 2018. And then the second to last column, or set of columns, we have the adopted budget for the current year. And then that last column is the for the proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23. As it currently stands, staff will be presenting some changes to the budgets to City Council at the workshop on May 31st. There's really no relevant changes that impact Ventura Water, so I'm not going to be covering those at this meeting. So suffice it to say that basically, as of now, the numbers in the proposed budget are going to be almost identical to what is adopted. And so in wastewater, there is projected to be a slight decrease in operational expenses. The biggest reasons for that the biggest driving factor for that is a reduction in the transfer to the wastewater capital fund. That is really the driving factor of the decrease in wastewater. Moving on to the water fund, as we can see, there's a little bit more. A little bit more fluctuation, especially going back to 17-18. In the water fund, part of it is, as like I said, drought rates were not recommended, right, or not before, but they were implemented in the past. There's some of the reasons for some of the previous highs in revenues. But looking at the next year, once again, we are anticipating to see decreased spending for next fiscal year. Compared to the current fiscal year. That has to do with some savings related to refinancing on the debt issuance. And we're also changing how we budget for a lot of the largest utility expenditures in the water fund. Historically, we have budgeted for maximum contractual amounts for some of the utility items. And now we're going to still allow for some contingency, but change the budget to be more based on actuals. And that's really, those are the 2 key primary changes in water. Like I said, in both of these funds, we can see that the operational spending is projected to decrease for 1 year. However, Raftelis will be getting into it a little bit later. All the needs for obviously additional revenues for the capital side, and then also for rate coverage that will be discussed later on in the presentation. So that's everything on the operating side for right now, and I'm available for any questions the commission may have.
Amanda, do we have anyone from the public who has submitted comments or wishes to speak?
We do not.
All right, let's go through the commissioners and see if anyone has questions or comments. Commissioner McCombs.
None, thank you.
Commissioner McCord.
No questions.
Commissioner Ackerman.
None, thank you.
Commissioner Breger.
No comment at this time.
Commissioner Clyte.
No questions.
Commissioner Hubner.
Yeah, I have. Sorry. You probably knew it was coming. When you look at the positions, the position requests, can you explain, and I've made this comment before, so this shouldn't come new, and this was a discussion when we were talking about the Ventura Water Pure. What's the process for getting a new position authorized? And I'll just put a little perspective, and there's several folks here that I used to work with at County Public Works. That process was pretty rigorous, usually denied, and not undertaken lightly. What's the process? And separately, what is the justification in a utility worker and a plant operator when the basic plant operation shouldn't have changed if the processes haven't changed?
So it's a very rigorous process. You can ask some of the other department heads in the room, and I'm a pretty big stickler when it comes to getting requests past me and getting a recommendation on requests. So we start the personnel request. Actually, HR kicks off the personnel request process, typically in the fall of the preceding year. Each department has to submit a memo with justified kind of expenditures and everything in the fall. That memo is then reviewed by HR and by finance. This year we add an additional step where every single position request in the city was reviewed by every member of the executive team. We sat together in a room, we prioritized the requests citywide, and then decided which positions should be added. In particularly, I know operationally that, the Ventura Water folks can speak a little bit probably in more detail to these positions, but in part, I think when we look at the history of Ventura Water, there has historically not been enough staff. So, maybe some things aren't being, new programs may not be added, but there have been things that have not been done, maybe some things that have not been maintained as we would have liked. And so those are some reasons for adding new positions. And like I said, Susan and her staff may be able to provide a little more details as well.
I'll just quickly add that's true. A lot of times what happens in the positions is we have staff that's part-time or maybe a consultant, and in the long term we actually need staff to be able to help out for future. And there's a lot more regulatory requirements, a lot more reporting that's required now too. So again, as Michael alluded to, we go through a rigorous process through many city manager's office, all department heads, and city council does the final approval.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Hubner got my question before I did, so
Well,
I have no further.
You can embellish on it if you
No, that was a good answer. Thank you. Thank you. So I don't think there's any action on this. It was information. Any other comments from the commissioners? All right, then thank you.
Thank you.
Very clear. Next item is the capital improvement project delivery update. Susan, do you have anything to say on this?
No, just Phil Nelson and Peter Shady is going to give an update, and we welcome Peter. He's been here for maybe a month now, and he's doing a great job, so we're really happy to have him here.
Good evening, Chair Mulligan, members of the Commission. I'm Phil Nelson, your Public Works Director. As indicated, I'll be providing a capital improvement program update, and also mixed in there, we'll attempt to answer some of the questions that we received from your Commission over the last couple of weeks. So I'd like to start off first with the eye chart that explains a little bit of how Public Works is set up and just who's there in the organization. The color coding, all of the green areas are those Public Works staff that really don't work with Ventura Water, all the other functions that we have, and the blue deal with the water. So starting at the top, of course, I have myself, and then I have two principal assistants. Starting over on the right side in the green, Mary Joyce Ivers, longtime city employees, is our Deputy Director for Operations. And as the name would imply, she is responsible for all of our field operations. So all of the fleet and facility ops, environmental sustainability. In that group, we do all our street maintenance, sidewalk maintenance, stormwater maintenance, all our environmental programs, that sort of thing. And then on the right-hand side in the blue, a new position that the council authorized for this year that we filled is Peter Shade as my assistant director, city engineer, responsible for all of the engineering functions within Public Works. And if I could at this time, I'd like to invite Peter to come up and maybe just introduce himself and a little bit of his background.
Good evening. As Phil said, my name is Peter Shade. I'm a homegrown resident of Ventura, went through the public school system here. I have about 30 years or over 30 years of engineering management experience in civil engineering. For 22 years, I was with the county of Ventura. Most of that experience was related to flood control, both design and construction, operation maintenance, and in the planning and regulatory. I would like to note I have a little bit of water experience. I started my career at LA Water and Power, and also worked for about 6 years at Santa Clara Valley Water District in San Jose. So I have some water experience, and one of the things that I told Phil when I first got here is what really attracted me to applying for this position was a variety of work that I can be involved with, all the way from water to transportation to pavement. So really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be involved in this project. As you can see from the org chart, I'm kind of in two boxes. So I'm managing the engineering services division, and that has all of our land development. So heavily involved with land development permitting in that section. We also do a lot of the public works planning work. That's where our pavement maintenance program is managed out of. And so my involvement will be heavily involved in that division. I would say lesser so in the design and construction and transportation, because those again have two principal engineers managing those divisions. But of course I will be overseeing them and will ensure that the delivery of the capital improvement program will be done on time and on budget. So that's a little bit about myself, and I look forward to meeting you all individually at a later time and being involved presenting to the Water Commission in the future.
So as I mentioned, Peter has the three divisions. He talked about engineering services. On the transportation side, Jeff Herford, that's all of our traffic and transportation engineering. And then in the middle, in the blue, continuing our design and construction division, currently being led by Greg Knutson in an interim capacity. One of the reasons why I was really excited to bring Peter on, he touched on a little bit, but quite a bit of background in capital project delivery, both as a practitioner, design side, and the construction management, and also through his just education and training. So it brings a lot to increasing our capability there. So when we break down here from design and construction, Greg's got 3 or 4 primary sections reporting to him. Two of them, these two, are design sections that are focused on really everything not Ventura Water. And so that's where all the design, or the stormwater facilities, streets, sidewalks, all of that happens here. We also have an engineering technician who does all our CAD work supporting the whole division. But the other engineers in this group do primarily the other work that I said, but occasionally they will work on water projects as well as needed. But the real focus, well, let me jump over here. I'll go to here This is our design water team. You'll notice Greg's name appears twice. Officially, Greg is the senior engineer leading that team. When the manager left last summer, we filled it in an interim with a guy named Jay Spurgeon for a few months. And then he left, decided he enjoyed being retired too much, so he left again. And then we put Greg into that role. So he's been kind of trying to fill both slots. And then 3 engineers working for him. Council approved that for starting to fill those positions in 2020. You can see on the far right-hand side here. Greg was hired into his role as the senior engineer in October of 2019, so approved for fiscal year 20. And then we made our last hire with Christina here last fall in August. And so it's been a little while getting the team filled out, but it has been filled out. And then you'll see Ron Herbst, who's with Ventura Water, but works very closely, or Greg works closely with him, very much joined at the hip to make sure that we're focused on the things that are important to Ventura Water and keeping that coordination well. And then the last group that we have is Mark Garcia's construction team. There are 2 engineers there, 4 inspector positions, 3 are filled, 1 is vacant. They, in addition to handling all of our CIP project construction management and inspection, also handled all of the land development inspection. So obviously we're not managing those projects, but we are making sure that they're being built to what they were approved to do and providing that oversight. We have approval for this team to hire 1 more engineer for next year, and that engineer will be focused on the land development piece, which will then really free up more of Mark and Shedrick's time to focus on CIP. Water, which is 3/4 of our portfolio, and then the other projects. And then we always augment that team with either project managers or inspectors as needed. We use consultants quite frequently to do that. Particularly the larger water projects, the aeration blowers is a good example. We'll use a contract construction manager. We may use inspectors on streets or different things. So that's how we really flex this team according to what construction we have going on in the field. The other thing I want to note is beginning in March of this year, we started using a consultant to help out with project management for water wastewater projects. So really with all that in told, we have for the first time, 4 engineers really focused on that. As I mentioned, this position's vacant, the manager position. We actually had our first round of interviews for that position yesterday. We'll have the second round on Friday and hope to be able to make a selection here very soon, get that position filled, and then we'll really be able to lock in the team and go into the new fiscal year for the first time with a fully staffed Ventura Water team and also consultant help. So quite a bit more brain power being applied on projects going into next fiscal year than we've had previously. So I want to talk a little bit about the rate study projects and kind of a breakdown of where they're at. My slides are just a high-level overview. I don't intend to step through each individual project. You'll see those in attachment A, but of course we are prepared to address any questions you might have about a specific project. But if I look overall, of the 37 projects that were part of the rate study, you can see the breakdown of where they are currently. 3 are either completed or canceled. We have 7 on hold. Any number of reasons. A number of them we're waiting for some completion of the master plans will inform some decisions there. We've got other issues in terms of acquiring right-of-way or property. There may be some permitting issues. Attachment A has more specifics for each one if you're looking for more detailed. But 27 of those are being currently worked on in some way or another. And this slide will show you exactly what that looks like. So when we track a project, typical stages that I'm sure you're familiar with, pre-design would be all that work that you do in your planning and preparation before you really begin any serious design activity. 3 are in that category. 17 are in some stage of design. The next slide I'll break that down a little bit as to where those are. 5 are in construction, and then 2 are in closeout, meaning all the construction effort is essentially complete. We're just going through maybe punch lists or final closeout work. So We've seen an increase in our construction and number of projects that are nearing construction. And I think that's a result of the design team. We've been bringing more and more people on board. We've been able to do more of that work. And that's why I'm really feeling very comfortable about going into next fiscal year, as I mentioned, really being almost 5 FTE staffed up, which is probably 30 to 40% more than what we've been seeing. We've been seeing maybe around 3 FTE since we formed the team, so it's quite an increase, and we'll be able to get a lot more work done. This graph shows you all those projects that are in design and where they are in the process. So we've got 3 that are really close to going out to bid. Actually, 2 of those, I think, are around maybe 98, 99% design, so they'll be going out soon. And then another 2, not too far behind, they're actually in the high 80%. And then you can see where the numbers are that fill out in the rest. So we're continuing to make progress and moving those designs along. As I mentioned, some of those we're waiting for some more information from the master plans or some other, just typical design and planning activities, but we are making progress in those areas. Want to address, there have been some questions regarding both schedule and cost increases. And so first, I want to talk about the cost increases, and particularly when compared to the rate study, the 2020 rate study. We definitely have seen cost increases, just, as everybody has. When we look at it in the aggregate, you'll see a 9.6% increase for the water. That's looking at the whole portfolio over the 10-year period, about a 9.6% increase in the total cost of those projects, and 26.6% in the wastewater. And as pointed out, and as Susan mentioned earlier, these do not include the MBR, anything related to the MBR or Ventura Water Pure, but definitely a significant increase. What's driving that? A number of things. One is scope changes, bearing in mind that a lot of these projects, when they're initially put in our CIP, it's a very conceptual project plan. We've identified a need, we've kind of roughed out the requirement, but not done any detailed planning at that point. So as we start going through that process, the pre-design, early design, we learn we need to add things to scope, we need to change things, as just normal project progression. So we get some scope changing there. Also, as we go through design, we get more detailed information that may not dramatically change the scope, but may change some of the components. That would be a cost increase. But probably the biggest one is just the cost and pricing that we've been seeing. Very, very much dramatic. And in fact, it's greater than what you're seeing in the CPI. And when we've talked to contractors, the main reason they've given us is that when they submit a bid, they're trying to guess what the price is, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, when they actually have to buy that stuff. And the fluctuations have been so much that they've said they just have to factor in more money because of what might happen. And they admit it's probably high, but they can't take the risk of prices going way beyond. And of course, we're going to hold them to their bid. Inflation's not a reason to issue a change order. And so they're just trying to hedge their bets. And that bears out in the data. When we looked at the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, is what you see inflation in the red. And I think we've all seen it's like right around a little over 8% right now. The ENR Building Construction Index has been much higher. It's not because, well, it is somewhat because construction materials are more. Some materials, we've seen big fluctuations in concrete, asphalt, steel, other things. But a lot of it is contractors just trying to price in what's going to look like 6 months from now and being very conservative in doing so. So we're really hoping that as we see that the price maybe won't come down, but maybe will stabilize at least a little bit more, take some of the unpredictability out, and we'll see that gap hopefully coming together. When that's going to happen, I'm not sure. But in the meantime, we're trying to factor that pricing into all the estimates. Obviously, all the estimates we've done previously to this were many months ago, and we didn't have this kind of increase factored into that, so we're working through that now. In terms of schedule delays, I admit we've had some delays. Of the 20 projects that I've got listed here, only 3 really haven't seen delays, and you can see the breakdown of the others. What are the reasons for that? Again, some of it is waiting completion of master plans. We've got some projects, we've got some that are actually even ready to bid, at least one that comes to mind. But we don't know if we really need that. The master plan may inform us that we actually don't need that project overall, and it's multi-million-dollar, and so why would we do it if we don't need it? So we're waiting to find that out. The other I mentioned a little bit earlier, just property or right-of-way acquisitions, determining the best site for a couple of projects, some of the permitting. We've seen delays in permitting just overall for a number of reasons. A lot of it has been COVID related, and we're still seeing some effects from that. Some different decisions, design decisions or changes in how we're approaching projects. And I alluded to earlier the staff capacity. We've roughly been averaging maybe around 3 productive design engineers. And now, that's just had an impact. So that's why I look forward optimistically now that we look at the staffing really filling out. And as I mentioned earlier, attachments A and also C. A will provide you a little more detail on any kind of delays. C is a series of Gantt charts, very simple Gantt chart, just showing approximately the duration of design, about 3 months in there for bid and award, and then we go into construction. So your commission had asked a couple of meetings ago that we could provide something like that, and so that's what's in there. That's why that is in there, to provide you with that information. With that concludes my update. I'm happy to, myself or staff, to address any specific questions you might have.
Amanda, do we have any public comments on this item?
We have Mr. Burt Handy.
Good evening, Commission, and hopefully everybody's doing well tonight. Susan, if I don't get a chance to say, congratulations and enjoy your retirement. The only question I had was on item 97951B. What was the cause of the vibration found in a defective well pump, or possibly a well not drilled correctly, or something else? What additional costs of this item go to the ratepayers? Side note for information, this well and facility was in the 2016-22 CIP, and it showed going to be completed in 2017-2018. The 2018-24 CIP, the well was slated to be completed in 2018-2019. In 2020-26 CIP, the well was slated to be completed in 21-22. With the problems with the well and the completion is pushed back till 22-23. It's really unfortunate that an item like this, that is a source of water, when we're worried about sources of water, takes so long to get this kind of a process through. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps staff could just answer the question that was in there about the vibration of the well and just the cause or cost responsibility.
Switched to a ductile iron head, which has pretty good
And the responsibility for the vibration, was that a contractor issue or design issue?
Well, it's hard to say.
Oh, in dispute, okay, currently in dispute, understood.
Was there a cost in it? A cost? No, we're holding them to the bid. It has not affected them. Contractor volume.
Thank you. Let's go through the commissioners and see if there are any more questions or comments. Commissioner McCombs.
My question, and I'm not sure if this is really for you, Phil, or for Ventura Water and Wastewater staff. I guess I'm still struggling to understand how something as large as the deficiencies that suggest that we need to go forward with MBR were not planned for or discovered, and instead it feels like it's an emergency, and a particularly expensive emergency. I just need a better understanding of why it came to light the way it did without more knowledge and ability to plan for it.
Yeah, I will ask staff for help on that one.
So we started our master plan process. Phil mentioned that a couple times, and that was where we did our condition assessment. We did it of the water and wastewater system collection and the treatment. And we noticed some structural deficiencies in our secondary process at our plant. That was last July, so that was really the first time we started to see all these deficiencies. There are a couple projects in design at the time that if we were to do MBR would eliminate the need for those, and those would be ticket items as well. So we started looking at, okay, we could have some savings with that, so that's going forward a couple months. Kroll engineers did an analysis to see how much money we really could save, and then we thought about Ventura Water Pure and what that could save too, because there is becoming industry standard to do MBR with pre-treatment for either potable reuse treatment train. So that's becoming a normal thing. So then that was why we also tried to rush it too, because obviously Ventura Water Pure is on a very tight timeline as well. So that's kind of it in a nutshell why we had to rush that decision so that we could get some extra savings overall.
Thank you.
If I could have a follow-up question for Adam. I understand what you appreciate the response, but there are staff out there 24/7, not quite 24/7 because you have obviously. There are operators, there's a CPO, they're out there, they're doing their regular business, keeping that plant going, meeting the regulatory requirements. They wouldn't have not noticed the structural deficiency, the corrosion?
Yeah, so it's kind of a slow creep that it's come across it. The aeration basins were the first ones we noticed. So yeah, we didn't notice it at first. It really took a structural engineer from Corollo to come out and actually inspect it, and then we actually did take concrete samples from the aeration basin to test it to really confirm that this isn't a one-time settling thing that could be just remediated through some straps on the concrete as a temporary fix. So we really did realize that there are settlement and concrete issues out there. So it's kind of outside of the expertise of an operator. It's not something that you would just notice intuitively just by walking by. There are some spots where there are issues, but it really took a structural engineer to notice that and do the concrete samples as well.
Thank you.
So I guess my follow-on comment, not so much a question, would be, to me, that drives home the importance of completing those master plans for all elements of the various systems, so that hopefully in the future we can take a more proactive approach to those issues and less reactive. So I know you haven't had your full staff, but to me, those master plans would be a significant priority item to get completed. Thank you.
Commissioner McCord.
I have a question for Mr. Nelson on Exhibit A as to mound number 3. When are we going to finish it?
I'm going to turn to staff again for that. Project-specific items.
Yeah, currently the contractor is mobilized on site. They've been working on the project. Unfortunately, we've had additional delays because of obtaining the VFD equipment. So as mentioned before, that lead time has gotten extremely long. Contractor can just not, they can't get the equipment right now. It's on back order, it's being shipped here. Ron, do you happen to know about when it's?
Well, I heard that 34-week number, maybe 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, we keep hearing that, but we haven't seen the equipment yet. We've heard 2 weeks, we've heard 4 weeks. The equipment's not here, and without the equipment, they can't complete the project.
So we don't know.
So we don't know. We keep in contact with the contractor. The contractor's keeping in touch with their suppliers, and when it ships, we'll know when it's shipped from the factory, and we'll know when it's going to be delivered.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's an issue with supply chain these days, is that it's very difficult to get commitments on certain pieces of equipment. In fact, we've heard electrical motor control centers are now ordering out a year as opposed to several months.
So the equipment that you're waiting for is essential for the production on the well, or does it address the VPD problem?
It's the variable frequency drive, so I don't believe that the well can be functional without that equipment.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
It's the variable frequency drives, and I don't think that they can bring the well system up without that, or effectively bring it up. I guess if it was an emergency, we could look at something, but right now it's not an emergency to bring that well system up.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman.
No questions or comments?
Commissioner Breger.
Yeah, I have a question actually for Peter. Welcome to the city, Peter. And I have a question that as far as project delivery, how do you feel that you're going to improve project delivery? Are you going to use techniques from the county that you obviously have very vast experience with?
Well, Phil and I have talked about looking at some of the county processes and whether there might be some that we might want to glean and bring to the city. They have, of course, a very mature organization that has been delivering projects for decades, of course. I also have a certificate in project management from UC Berkeley, so I'm hoping that we can implement, and I intend to insist that we implement some more project management techniques and controls so that we can track and monitor and report both internally and with your commission to be able to rectify situations before they become problems. So as was commented, proactively manage these projects in a way that we can assess issues before they come to fruition, and then maybe do some course corrections in order to rectify those situations.
Okay. And then also, are you having issues, I guess the city and the county or whatever, in general, getting contractors to bid projects? Are you having less contractors bidding nowadays, or?
The latest information I've seen is that we're still getting good response for bids. I think that would be a concern as prices go up and as the money, federal and state money, become more infused into construction. I would be concerned that prices and less competitiveness might occur because of those things. Anytime you have a great demand,
Right.
I recall back in the mid-2000s when we had land development booming at the same time as the economy booming in general. It became difficult to get a good number of bidders for some bids because there was just so much work out there.
Right.
One key that I think will be worth considering, and I'm sure that other folks here at the city have thought about in the past, is the time of the year that we bid. My observation has been that if we can bid before the construction season during the winter time, we oftentimes get better responses from bids because the contractors haven't yet basically filled in their portfolio of work for the year. So there might be some things that we can do to elicit some more bidders if that becomes an issue.
Well, okay. Well, thank you very much, and again, welcome to the city.
Thank you.
Commissioner Clyde.
On the delays on the pump stations, there's a Colorado replacement and a couple other pump stations mentioned. Is there any threat to our water system by delays in addressing these pump stations?
I think I'd like to ask someone from Ventura Water to address that one.
Our current supply, our current water facilities are. Yeah, we have currently rehabbed the wells that we have now. The pumping stations have been retrofitted, and Michael talked about it. We're changing the way we do preventative maintenance within the whole water system. So everything looks really well, and we did plan these out in a good amount, far enough advance. So we're not an immediate threat, but it is important to get them done. We do still encourage to get these done on time.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hubner.
I also wish to welcome Peter. If the commissioners don't know, or members of the audience, staff, Ventura Water staff, Peter and I work together. We're counterparts, Deputy Director of Public Works at Ventura Watershed Protection District. Of course, Mr. Nelson was in the Central
Engineering Services.
Yeah, Engineering Services, sorry, within Public Works. So welcome to the city, and we definitely will look forward to your expertise and experience in getting these projects out. And with that, I'm just the questions, and if you're one, I want to also thank everyone for whoever assembled this information. It's very helpful. The Gantt charts, the explanation. I know there's at times where that may seem like we're asking for too much or too much information, but this is very helpful, at least for us to understand the internal processes in what you're encountering. Some of us have some experience, but every project is different. That being said, I am troubled by what I see on attachment B and some of the cost changes. I mean, some of these they're significant. I mean, and you say it, significant, at least on the water, and perhaps there's on the wastewater side, there's another sheet. But I'm just going to focus on that one in particular. Oh, I see it. It's wastewater below that. And, state interconnect, I'll just start with the state interconnection. We're, 33%, and we're not done with design. You have two water line projects, one at 144% difference, and another at a 62%. And we have the treatment at 45%. So, and these are millions of dollars in terms of potential cost overruns. So we're being asked today to consider recommending, to the City Council a water increase. And with that goes, I think, ownership of where that money, if we're collecting it, and how it's being expended. Maybe I'm just talking to my fellow commissioners a little bit here as we consider that. I'm into fiscal accountability and the bottom line and watching costs. So I just want to put that out there at this time. It's not really a question unless there's any explanation further on why there was millions of dollars in cost overruns. But I am troubled. So thank you.
Okay, and I would like to echo Commissioner Hubner's comments on the information provided. I think it was really helpful. It was very well organized. You had good explanations for the changes in cost and schedule, and this is great. I feel like I understand the issues. And I will say that I spent over 30 years in my career building water infrastructure projects, and the delays and the costs and the changes are typical of what I've seen. All these make sense. It's pretty typical. You define a project, you try to define the scope, you do an estimate, and you learn more things. And they typically go up, and this is just typical. The only other way to do it is kind of double your estimate at the beginning, and that's not good practice either. So I think this is well explained. I think it's well justified, and appreciate the detail. Any other comments from the commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the annual water and wastewater rate check-in, final check-in for fiscal year 2021-22, financial plan update and revised 10-year financial plan results. Susan, do you want to kick this off?
Thank you. And just want to say thank you to Kevin and Charles for being here again tonight, and hopefully we can wrap it up tonight, because obviously we do need the rate increases.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, Commissioners. Kevin Costa from Raftellus, joined again by Charles Diamond. I guess it's my job to tie together the last two agenda items, plus some of the Ventura Water Pure stuff that we had previewed last meeting. Hopefully you found all the information in the packet helpful, both the capital, but also the O&M discussion and the Ventura Water Pure discussion. So hopefully we're able to answer questions that came out of the April meeting. We're going to follow the same progression in this presentation as we did last month. Slides will be very similar, but we do have revisions based on updates with staff in the last month. We'll review those changes and the updated financial plan results, and then we'll talk about our next steps, which include a recommendation, and then previewing some WIFIA work, which is next. So the goal tonight, provide you our final update for the rates check-in for the fiscal year end 2022 update, receive additional comment and feedback from you all, and then hopefully reach a point of consensus on implementing year 2 rates July 1. Review of our kind of very high level but key changes to the financial plan between the rate study and kind of the end of year 1. So elephant in the room, addition of the MBR project on the wastewater side, which I know net savings ultimately, but is an inclusion of some significant additional costs. We have increased cost pressure on Ventura Water Pure due to inflation, as we were just privy to. Increased O&M assumptions now relative to the rate study. So we're seeing some projected cost increases and pressures on the water side and also on the wastewater side. We have some more precise financing assumptions when it comes to Ventura Water Pure, and I should say more precise, but also current with all the changes we've seen in interest rates. And then we have updates to our projected developer fee revenues, capacity fees, and net zero. So those are all incorporated into the update. Updates from last meeting. So Charlie has worked with Ventura Water Pure staff to really dial in our expectations and our projections for VWP O&M. We're within about 0.4% of our previous estimates, so no real change there, but just confident to say that those are very well dialed in. Refinements of Ventura Water Pure debt financing, so we've worked with city staff. WIFIA interest rate is now projected as high as 3.75%. Just a month ago, we were talking at 3%. Rates have moved very quickly. We were assuming 2% in the rate study just, 12, 14 months ago. So that's a big addition, obviously, in future debt service. Modest increase in our assumption for SRF financing rates, so from 2% to 2.25% to be a bit more conservative. And then an increase, which is really a reversion to what was included in the rate study, a 35-year repayment term for WIFIA rather than 30, which was presented last month. And then we had some discussion on this idea of using a rate stabilization fund to meet coverage in specific years where we might have a shortfall. So that's been incorporated, and you'll see the results here. So we'll start with water. A little more definition on a rate stabilization reserve. So what it does is it allows us to dedicate some of our net revenues that we generate to a specific purpose, and that purpose being meeting coverage in years where we would otherwise not meet coverage. So it temporarily restricts those reserves. Ultimately, it's just net cash, and we're essentially borrowing from ourselves for the short term by restricting those funds and then using them in the sense of generating revenues in future years, which ultimately goes back into our reserves. And we've parsed out some of the language in your existing debt covenants. So when we look at our not really scenario one, it's just a look back to our rate study projections. That's first. So for water, that's Obviously, pre-MBR, that assumes our 7% annual increases for the 10-year term. No use of a rate stabilization fund. We didn't need that in the past. So that's our rate study outcome. Number 2 is our financial plan update without using rate stabilization fund. So it's mostly what we presented last meeting with some revisions. And then number 3 is really our solution. That's the financial plan update and then utilizing a rate stabilization fund. So our results from the rate study, the chart on the left is our debt coverage, blue being calculated or projected calculated value, red being our minimum, so we're good on our coverage. It does decline over time as we draw upon funds for Ventura Water Pure specifically, but then it rebounds in future years as we generate additional net revenues. Chart on the right, our fund balance, starting in a healthy position with our reserves, drawing down over time so that at the end of that 10-year horizon, we're still meeting or exceeding our reserve target. So our update, this is including our financial plan updates and MBR. So now we've got coverage issues out beginning in the middle of the decade in 2026. That recovers as we add additional revenue to the system, but we obviously have this valley over several years that we need to solve. On the cash front, not too bad. Actually, when we look an additional year out, we're showing a slight under in our reserve balance in only the last year. And this next, our final slide is the solution. So this is where we utilize a rate stabilization fund. You can see now if I toggle between number 2 and if we look at years 26 through 28, we're able to effectively borrow those net revenues in early years to utilize them in the mid years, and our blue line, our calculated, is just at minimums. We solve every year except for fiscal year 2029. So the summary on the water side, utilizing a rate stabilization fund mostly solves the coverage issues in the middle of the decade. As we get beyond the 5-year plan, I want to remind everyone that our assumptions on the capital program are not adopted. They're assuming a $12 million spend per year. And then each additional year, obviously, all of our escalation assumptions become a little bit less certain as we go out over a longer horizon. Additional options, and this will come into play, may come into play on the wastewater side too, is an idea rather than a rate stabilization fund that is only allowed to borrow against a given year to fund. Since you do have a healthy reserve balance to start, we're exploring the idea that perhaps we could seed a rate stabilization fund with existing reserves rather than relying on future net revenues only. So we're working with City Finance to look at that. And then the alternative always is in the next rate cycle, there's a potential that we look at higher revenue increases, i.e. rate increases. So we'll go to the wastewater side, same progression. Number 1 being our rate study results. Number 2, the financial plan update with MBR, but without a rate stabilization reserve. And then the third one, our update with MBR and a rate stabilization reserve. So similar story to water and the rate study. Our debt coverage declines as we draw down funds for Ventura Water Pure construction, but still a healthy coverage that increases beyond 2027, so we're good there. And then our reserve balance is similar story. We're starting in a very good position, drawing those down gradually over the 10-year look and finishing above minimums. When we update the financial plan, we've got cost pressure. We have MBR that hits wastewater almost entirely. And so we've got even greater coverage issues than we saw on the water side, beginning in 2026 all the way through the 10-year horizon. And then the cash position as well, as we look out with increased debt service related to Ventura Water Pure and the addition of MBR, and also the increase in inflationary pressure. So our solution is partial in this sense. We've managed to get ourselves through the current 5-year rate cycle. So similar to water, we can utilize a rate stabilization fund, get us through 2027, and then we'll be looking for additional solutions and creative financing beyond 2027 to achieve coverage. Now, the rate stabilization, that helps with the coverage side, but it's not necessarily going to solve anything on the reserve side because, again, there's no net change to cash. We're simply borrowing temporarily from ourselves and then repaying. So we have a cash issue on the wastewater side over the long term. So we can get through the 5 years of rates on the wastewater side with this rate stabilization fund, but beyond that, as I mentioned, we've got both coverage and cash balance issues. But then the same story is true as on water, which is beyond the 5 years, we're looking at kind of ballpark capital expenditures, $8 million per year beyond the 5 year. And we're working with city finance so that we can look at additional financing options and trying our best to minimize any future rate impacts beyond that 5 year cycle. So ultimately, our recommendation, along with staff, is to implement our year 2 rates as adopted in the rate study. That's a 7% on water, a 6% for wastewater, and then for the commission to request an update by city staff once we've locked in on financing terms for WIFIA and have a loan set for closing, which I believe is in the fall term. And with that, we'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Amanda, do we have any public comments or requests to speak?
We do not.
All right. Let's go through the commissioners and we'll do comments and questions. Commissioner McCombs.
Thank you. My first question is for Mr. Hogan. Are you satisfied that the proposed use of the rate stabilization fund is in compliance with Prop 218?
Yes, Commissioner McCombs, and we also discussed it with the city's bond counsel at Jones Hall, and they confirmed that it complies with all applicable laws.
Okay, thank you. The second is not so much directed to you, I apologize, but in response to the responses we were given, one of the questions we had asked last month was about the change in the pay-go policy, specifically related to Ventura Water Pure. And if I understand the answers here, it's that we're now assuming that basically, quote, all other programs will be financed. And perhaps I didn't understand the responses, but I thought that there had been a pretty clear, excuse me, direction in policy by the Water Commission previously to say that we wanted there to not be more than 50% of the capital programs for any specific project to be financed. So I feel like the answer is kind of in conflict with that, but perhaps I'm not understanding.
So good evening, Commissioners. I'm Linda Szymanski, Ventura Water Pure Program Director. I don't know that I can comment on what the PAYGO policy was previous, but our current PAYGO policy is really just related to what we're going to be paying cash for. And it is for our land acquisitions, and then it was for the wetlands project. The land acquisition is because when you finance through federal, using financing through the federal mechanism, there are some things that they actually, apply to your land and makes so that it's not necessarily yours free and clear. So that's why we were doing PAYGO for the land. And for the wetlands, we decided that PAYGO, and this was in the rate study also, that because we were unsure of whether we were actually going to be needing to construct the wetlands, we decided that those would not be in the financing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, no, I understood that. I guess it's more of a philosophical question, which is, if I'm understanding what's presented here, part of the explanation for some of the increases in costs, which feed into the rate study, are that we are now basically saying we're going to finance the entirety of Ventura Water Pure, except for specifically the land acquisition and so on. And I guess I'm back to the philosophical question, which was, if the Water Commission had previously said, and we thought it had basically been an agreed upon policy, that we wanted to be respectful and prudent in how much we were financing, are we being told that we're making a policy shift from that? Because simplistically, I go back to, at the moment, understanding that the projections say it's going to go away, but at the moment we have a substantial amount of cash that we've basically accumulated over the past several years because, we were in rate shortage rates. Customers were paying those rates. We weren't spending as fast as we planned, which was basically allowing us to accumulate money to eventually build the CIP. I'm sort of feeling like, well, aren't we going to use those dollars first?
And so I think one thing to remember is we have two competing policies here, right? During the rate stabilization or during the rate setting process, with Raftellus, with the staff of Ventura Water, you all, the members of the commission, set priorities on what you wanted to do. And one of the top priorities was try to maintain rates as low as possible. Not in that exact words, but if we were to try to use cash to finance this project, it would be an unbearable burden on current ratepayers. And so financing this project creates intergenerational equity, where those who will be using the project for decades to come will be paying their fair share instead of relying on the current ratepayers to pay the vast majority of the project.
Oh, and that makes sense. I think it's just, it's connecting the dots from the previous policy considerations to now the logistics of what we're actually doing, so that we're being clear. It's not that we're necessarily making a completely different change, we're just having to solve and prioritize in a different fashion. So not necessarily disagreeing with the conclusion, but I think it's an important distinction to make, one, when you present the information to council, and two, as you start thinking about the public information that you're going to present when we say, oh, by the way, we're raising rates. We got this approved last year, but we said we'd check in with you. We haven't quite met all of our milestones, but we still need to do this. I just think you need to, not you specifically, but all of us collectively need to set the stage for why this is the right decision. Thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Okay, here. Staff report, page 2 of 6, second paragraph. I'm reading, an additional pipeline was added to the pipeline project that would convey groundwater to Advanced Water Pure for desalting. Is that what I'm thinking of? It's a brine line from the groundwater back down to Advanced Water Pure, improving our water quality?
Commissioner Ackerman, yes, that's correct. That was actually in the rate study and in the plan for Ventura Water Pure in the out years when we were looking at how we would actually construct this, assuming that we were going to go forward. It felt like a good idea to move that pipeline forward so we wouldn't have to tear up the road again. It's not something that is necessary for the project at the moment. It was actually advanced planning.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up on that, because that was my question.
Will that then improve the water quality that we've been talking about as a group here for quite some time, as far as totally dissolved solids and some of the other things that we're trying to accomplish?
Actually, the desalter and groundwater enhancement was not something that was contemplated until the out years of the project. So no, it's not anything that's in the near term that will help with that.
Okay. But not in the near term, but in the future, we have an open trench. We're going to put the pipe in now and activate it later when we need to, correct?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, a great idea.
And my follow-up, Linda, on that, can you explain what that is? I'm not following. Are you looking to take groundwater and treat it at the AWPF? Then what would happen with the water? Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's correct. In the planning, there was space set aside at the AWPF for groundwater desalting, or to improve the groundwater quality again in the out years. And so this pipeline would bring water from the wells to the AWPF, treat it, and then it would enter the distribution system.
So you'd be looking to lay that in the same trench as what pipe?
It would be the water that is going out to the injection.
So you've got a potable and a non-potable water in the same trench. Okay.
Yeah.
That seems like that's two trenches. So I'd look carefully at whether you're saving money. You're moving an expensive project forward. I'd consider that very carefully before doing that. I don't think that saves money. Thanks. Okay. Commissioner Ackerman, anything more?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Breger?
No, I had that same question, but Linda, you answered it. Thank you very much. No questions at this time.
Commissioner Clyde?
Yeah, I had the same question on the desalting thing. It kind of seemed to come out of the blue, and I had never heard of it before. And we've been discussing the hard water problem. I thought maybe you guys came up with some kind of solution, but it sounds kind of odd to me. So it sounds like we have an open trench. We're going to take the ultra-purified water out to the aquifer, inject it, then we're going to pump that water out and pipe it back to the plant and desalt it and then send it out for potable water. I'm really confused on this. Could you explain that again?
Sure. Yes, we would be taking the clean water out to the injection area, but what we were also looking at is taking the water that is not the purified water, but still, the water that has the high TDS in it, and bringing that back to a separate process at the advanced water treatment plant.
Okay, so not the same process as what's going to give us our ultra-purified water.
Correct, it's a completely separate
process. This would just be a decel kind of thing.
Yeah.
But all of this is coming from the same mound aquifer, is that correct?
This would be coming basically from the same aquifer. So.
Are you going to separate the ultra-purified water we just put in there from the other groundwater?
Yeah, it basically has to do with which wells we're going to be pumping out of and which ones will probably most likely be able to draw the water from. It's most likely that our first initial well will be drawing most of the pure water, and that some of the wells that are a little bit further out will be drawing the higher TDS water.
Okay, and has there been any modeling done to look at pumping influence on the wells that we have out there?
We're actually in the process of updating some of our modeling right now, so.
Okay, I would like to look at that. I'm a hydrogeologist and have done modeling, so I would like to look at that. I appreciate all this information. It's a lot to absorb, and I don't have any further questions right now.
Commissioner Huebner?
Yes, just a few here. Turning to attachment A, again, I appreciate all this information that was compiled. I actually wish we had it at the last meeting, but I appreciate it that we have it tonight. I'm going to try not to use the same word, but again, troubled with some of the increases that I see, and I just don't understand the budgeting process. Perhaps it can be explained to me a little better. There's significant increases from what was in the rate study and then the update. If you want to look at the top 5 in water and the top 3 or 4 in wastewater, I mean, these are not small increases. So, and of course, affect the rate study, and so how is budgeting, how is expenditures watched within Ventura Water?
I'm just pulling up the attachment real quick. All right, so starting with, and I think it is, I guess starting out, I think it's important to differentiate the difference between budgeting and forecasting. So we do have an annual budgeting process, but then there's also a forecasting process. I mean, especially in, this rate model, we're doing forecasting going out as far as 10 years. So there's a difference between the two. But in part, looking at, at water, one of the largest ones is for salaries and benefits. It is a priority for City Council to try to pay city employees closer to market rates. Council has directed us to work towards that, and it's reflected right there. And then I said, the water utilities, the cost of water is going up. Right there it talks about the purchase of Casitas. Driving up that's, roughly $636,000. Groundwater extraction fees are going up. And then, looking at number 4, really, I think this pops up in a couple different places, but you're going to see an increased effort for preventative maintenance. And that's something that I know Ventura Water is putting a greater focus on, and it's something that in the long run will pay dividends. In the long run, as we catch up and we are doing that preventative maintenance, it will produce lower costs for maintenance in the future. And then we have the Saticoy Country Club. Over this past year, we ran into some interesting financial situations with the country club. It's a little harder for them, being a smaller operation, to plan for non-routine large expenditures. So we've actually started including an annual budget that they can manage, and basically they will just be paying us regular amounts over time instead of these unanticipated large lump sums on occasion. And so that's really kind of the top 5 for Ventura Water. Let me scroll down to wastewater.
So you have professional services,
Mm-hmm.
basically had almost no money budgeted, and it's now $536,000.
Yeah, and so for that, for example, there's the mixed media filter rehabilitation. So these are, I imagine they're engineers and whatnot that are going to consult on this project. I know Gene and Vince are over there, I think nodding their heads. So a lot of these professional services, these are going to be, oftentimes they're engineering firms. Sometimes there may be some legal firms in there on Ventura Water, but most of the time it's, like I said, engineering services to do various different things. Estuary monitoring, those costs are going up. Especially on the wastewater side. There's on water too, but we see it more on the wastewater side, kind of on the top list of increases, is chemical costs. Chemical costs, have, like I said, Phil was showing the chart earlier of kind of construction increases. I think if you look at just the rates for chemicals, it's going to be even more extreme than that. I just know from managing purchasing and finance that we've had to renegotiate almost every single chemical contract over the last year. Basically suppliers are pulling out left and right, saying we can no longer provide goods at that rate. And then, moving on to number 4, there's some contract services, labor's parts, others. It says nano air treatment process, annual equipment maintenance agreements. Once again, I think that one's getting more towards the equipment maintenance agreements, making sure that we're being preventative, we're taking care of things before it's an emergency. Like I said, and that's like manhole rehabs is number 5. I think once again you're getting to some of the same things, just adding more routine maintenance to prevent bigger problems in the future. So
Thank you for those explanations. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'd first like to say that I thought that the table that showed the increases in the O&M budget and the explanations was very clear and very comprehensive and answered all my questions. So I thought that, thank you, Suzanne. I thought that was great. I know it's a lot of work to put it together, and it really answered all my questions and makes me feel comfortable about the increases. I have a question and a comment about WaterPure. The question on, it assumes design build. I was curious when we would get our update on the design build decision and how that's made. I know it's been sort of January. I think we thought we were going to hear it.
Yeah, Commissioner Mulligan, we are in the process of updating the schedule. A lot of it is dependent upon the financing And so adding MBR in has, we're renegotiating with WIFIA at this point. We do believe that they will allow us to include MBR in our project that they will be financing. That changes some of the frequency of when money is going to be available. So we need to take a look at, just how the projects are going to be set and what we can actually do. We may, depending on when money is available, we may not be able to commit to something like design build.
Okay.
But we need to look at the financing.
Okay, that's clear, thank you. And then I guess I'll just reiterate my concern about adding a pipeline for an entirely different purpose into the Ventura Water Pure project. That it seems like it's not part of any master plan. It seems like there could be CEQA implications, and there certainly are rate implications of building a pipeline early. So I just put that out there.
And honestly, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but we plan on pushing that one off until later. So.
Okay, I think that would be advisable. Any commissioners have any more questions or comments?
Just for clarification, you're not going to put two pipelines in the same trench when you open that trench for the water from Water Pier to out to the storage?
Yeah, it's our intention at this point, basically from affordability standpoint also, when we build the desalter and when we get to that point, that we will take care of the pipelines associated with it then.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I asked about public comment, right? All right. Then I think we're looking for a motion, and it's up on the screen if anyone would like to make a motion.
I will move that we implement the FYE 2023 rate increases as stated on the slide. And also that we will request an update by city staff once the WIFIA terms are finalized and the loan is set for closing. I believe that is all one motion. Any second?
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Could you restate Commissioner Kleit's full motion? I couldn't really hear what she has.
It's what's on the board there.
It's on the slide?
Yeah,
Yes.
everything that's on the slide.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. It's okay.
Commissioner Breger?
It's you.
Yes.
Commissioner Kleit?
Yes.
Commissioner Huebner?
No.
Commissioner McCord?
I heard you. Yes.
Vice Chair McCombs?
Yes.
Chair Mulligan?
Yes. Thank you. Next item is an update on the State Water Interconnection Project. Betsy.
Good evening. For the record, I am Betsy Cooper, the Assistant General Manager of Water Resources. And as requested at the, this is the best part, you can't leave. Anyway, as requested at the November meeting, I'm continuing to give monthly updates on the State Water Interconnection Project. So first of all, the agency agreements. First off, the Casitas exchange agreement. As review, this would be agreement between the city and Casitas that would define how Casitas would receive deliveries of their state water allocations through the interconnection project. So we should be ready to present the terms of this agreement to you at the next Water Commission meeting. We were hoping to present it to you tonight, but Casitas is still looking at some direction on their end before they were comfortable with us presenting at a public meeting. So, like I said, we're hoping to present the terms of that agreement to you next month. We're also hoping to bring the construction operation interagency agreement back to you at the June meeting. So that was an agreement that back in February of 2021, I believe, was brought to you. You had recommended approval to City Council. However, Casitas then had some additional comments, concerns about the agreement. We did delay, and they wanted to bring forth this exchange agreement first and understand the terms of that before going back and revisiting the construction operation interagency agreement. We are hoping that both will be presented again to you next month. If it's only the exchange agreement, there would be some caveat that this other one would also have to be approved before, presenting both for City Council approval. As far as the design update, we had 10% plans submitted to us. I believe that was just last week. So we're in the process of reviewing those. These are the initial documents that show our proposed easements, and will be used to start easement acquisition. So we'll be proceeding with that with our right-of-way consultant. We are behind schedule on completing the preliminary design report. We do have a meeting this Friday to discuss this report and provide direction on the final items that are needed to complete the preliminary design report. A couple other items that are being worked on. I think I mentioned before, there's the Saticoy burn dump site. This is an old dump site that's located on the north side of the Santa Clara River. Stantec, our design consultant, is completing a phase 2 environmental site assessment at that site, and all the field work has been completed. We should receive that report next week. And the purpose of this assessment is to better define the limits of the landfill. That will, in turn, be used to define the profile of the pipeline through this area. And lastly, all the geotechnical field work has been performed along the entire alignment, and we should be receiving the geotechnical report for review in the next couple weeks. So that is my update, and do I have any questions?
Commissioner Clyde.
On that landfill, are they doing chemical testing or just geotechnical?
It's just geotechnical to basically find the limits of the debris, and it's really a Department of Drinking Water requirement. We just need to make sure our alignment goes far enough below that. So it looks like, from what I've heard, it's about maximum 20 feet deep, and we were planning to go about 30 feet deep in that area, so it looks promising from a Department of Drinking Water perspective.
And did you say that was a burn dump or a debris
Yeah,
dump?
it wasn't a landfill. I guess it was a old dump site. I don't have a whole lot of history on that. But it was, you might, yeah, it wasn't an actual landfill that was lined.
I would just offer perspective. There's an additional one in Piru district, actually, and Peter knows this project. We built some steam bank protection, but we also did a phase 2 at that time, and pretty common, I guess, in those years.
So when...
Trash and debris, essentially they were burned and left.
Okay, so it wasn't a chemical dump site with drums?
No.
No.
That was my concern, that you never know what really goes into these things, and then all of a sudden you're, 10 feet below the bottom, and it's like reeking, and there's toxins, so you're not suspecting anything like that? Okay. That would be nice. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner McCord?
Ms. Cooper, I'm mindful of the time that has passed on the interagency agreement. I'm sure we don't have someone from Casitas here tonight.
Not tonight. They should be here next month.
I know they're experiencing problems. But my question, perhaps for the commission and others, is should not an exchange agreement be dependent on a successful execution of an interagency agreement? In my point of view, they should be one conditioned on the other. Doing one without the other is to invite disagreement, controversy, potential lawsuits. It's a mistake. I just wish Casitas could make a decision. I know you're working on it, so I'm not asking you a question. I'm just commenting that it's disappointing that we haven't moved along since we heard from Mr. Brennan back in November. He was pretty clear he was going to work on it, and it's pretty clear that those folks up there are having some issues as to what to do. At what point does it become our problem? And tonight, what do we see the increase of costs? How much? 33%? Has our delays and procrastination helped us in this project cost-wise? Absolutely not. We need to make a decision one way or the other, sooner than later. That's my comment.
Any more comments?
I just want to echo those as well.
One what?
Echo Commissioner McCord's comments.
Any others? Amanda, do we have any public comment?
Not for this item.
All right, thank you, Betsy.
All right, thank you.
And now we have tentative schedule and our final general manager report from this general manager.
Thank you, Chair and Water Commission. Just a couple items. Past council items. We had the transmittal of the fiscal year 22-23 operating budget that Michael Kuhn talked about. Also a public hearing adoption of the master fee schedule. These are fees that go in, user fees to the city for land development and other fees that we have. And then upcoming council items on the 31st are going to be the 2022 Comprehensive Water Resource Report, as well as State Drought Update that Jenny talked about tonight, and then the Groundwater Sustainability Agency GSA Directors. And then my final comments, I just want to say appreciated working with everyone here, and you're in good hands with a great staff of Ventura Water, as well as other departments in the city and consultants. And they do a great job. They know what they're doing. As far as budget and projects, we scrutinize ourselves very much so, and we're here for the ratepayers and for Water Commission and City Council. So thank you.
Thank you. Amanda, do we have any public comment on this item?
Not on this item.
Do we have any commissioner comment? Commissioner, you know what? I'll go through the list because it looks like we've got a few.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner McCombs.
Nope.
Commissioner McCord.
I'm going to give a big applause to Ms. Rundgren. Okay.
Yeah.
I so move.
I think we should have a public applauding session.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ackerman.
I totally agree with that.
Commissioner Breger.
No comments.
Commissioner Clyde.
Just a big thank you.
Commissioner Hubner.
No, I'm good, thank you.
And I would like to say, I've known Susan for about 25 years. We first met when we were both arguing with a very contentious contractor down in Port Hueneme. And I saw you go to City of Ventura not too long after that, and I've seen you in lots of meetings advocating for the city all over the county all those years. You've worked hard for the city, and particularly the last few years as a general manager in a really difficult and contentious job. And under your leadership, this city's moving forward with Water Pure and with the state project Interconnection. So there's going to be water reliability for decades to come. So as you move into retirement, I think you can pat yourself on the back and say that you got a lot done, and now you can enjoy yourself. So thanks, Susan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Public communications. Do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
We have Mr. Burt Handy.
Good evening, Commissioners, and congratulations again, Susan. Cemetery Park, I sent all of your commissioners an email, and I think that that's something that should be reviewed by the city and find a way to be able to make that a more appreciable way of handling it in this situation we've got. Ventura Water has a person that actually handles that area. And I think it's something, in talking to the parks people, we only have 2 people, we can't do that. Well, we need to work as a city together, all employees, to work on that and take care of it. Everybody carries a phone. Everybody has a geo capability on that phone. Everybody, if they see water, they should be able to send it to a location, and it should be able to be accessed and reviewed, regardless of whether it's a park, a waterway along the road. Main Street has the same problem in that center median there, all over the city. It just needs to be addressed. In regards to the potential changes for per capita with water use, the potential change for 2025 and 2030, they're going to drop, they're proposing dropping it from 52.5 gallons per day to 47. And for 2030, they're talking about dropping that from 50 to 42. That is what they talked about in the meeting today. The chart shows, one of the other things they showed there is that they had a 5% decrease in influent going into the treatment plant. Turned out to be a reduction of 11% in the effluent going out. That was a study that they found. That's something that's going to be affecting how effective that the water pure system is, and the idea of actually treating some of our hard water might be a viable option for that reason alone. Water and wastewater historical information, just so you know, in 2012 it was 12.9 million gallons a day. It was 11.7 million gallons a day in 2021. Wastewater influent was 8.6 million gallons a day in 2012 and 7.3 in 2021. It's gone down considerably, and it's going to continue to go down. The sewer trucks use potable water. Why? They have recycled water at the plant. If they filled it up in the morning when they go out, they could turn around and use it anywhere in the city, hook up to a fire hydrant anywhere they want to. It needs to be accounted for. It should not be lost water. The street sweeper handled through Harrison gets free water also. That needs to be addressed. The area when you have leaks, you guys know when the pipe is there, you know what the size of the pipe is, you know how long it's been there. I would like to see something showing what the losses are in our water break lines, because that information is available. You have 2 of the 3 factors. You have a pipe size, you have a time factor. You can figure out how much water is lost. It should be part of the recording situation so everybody can see it. Changing from 6 to 7.5% in a lost water situation is not appropriate in my opinion. Let me see here. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good evening, and hopefully these things can be addressed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Particularly appreciate the information about the park. I expect that's the sort of thing staff will follow up on. Did you want to comment on any of that, on that?
I'm not sure what he's talking about.
Oh, you didn't see it, I'm sorry. Over irrigation at Cemetery Park.
Cemetery Park has already been taken care of, and the Parks Department has talked to Mr. Burt Handy, and it's been resolved.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Okay. Any other public comments, Amanda?
That's all.
All right. Commissioner communications. Commissioner McCombs.
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner McCord.
None, thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman.
None, thank you.
Commissioner Breger.
No comments at this time.
Commissioner Clyte.
No comments?
Commissioner Hubner.
No comments.
And I have no comments either. So we will adjourn this meeting.